All right, welcome everybody. It's good to see you here tonight. We have a lot to go over, and I'm committed to getting you out of here being done in an hour. So one thing is I was reviewing what was released for you guys over the weekend, the 3 video segments. As I went through the 3rd video segments, I just was checking. I wasn't watching everything, just didn't want to repeat anything too much. I wanted to see what. I got to the end of the 3rd segment and realized there was another segment that was completely missed, a whole other topic. So that topic is on how our diet has changed over the last 100 years in America, which is really critical. So I'm gonna go over that tonight, but our IT person, not Logan, but someone else at Steubenville, has released that, so that should be available on Facebook to watch it. So you know, you can probably get most of it here tonight because I'm going to show you the same slides and give you that. So I want to do a brief review, a few key highlights from what you already watched, and then do that topic, and then I'm going to show you some specimens here that will kind of tie everything in we're talking about this week with real life and what happens in our bodies. So I thought I should show you that. I think that's pretty good. I like that humor. There's another one I should show you sometime. It looks like it's from Arizona. It's like blue skies with one tiny cloud at the top, and the person says, "Looks like rain today. I won't be able to go walking." So, okay. So I came across this journal last year, and it just brings out an important point in some of the mixed message of healthcare. So this article is, this was from the Family Practice News, and they're talking about prevention, cardiovascular prevention. And basically, when I read this article, there's usually a pro and a con side. That's why you see 2 authors there. But this article on heart disease prevention had nothing to do with the prevention we're talking about. It was all about controlling blood pressure and cholesterol medicines. It was all about the medication approach. And so nowhere was the root cause of the disease addressed, which is what we're going to address tonight and what we addressed earlier over the weekend. And then if you look at the very bottom, Dr. Ferentz, who is the doctor on the left, look at these connections he's got. I mean, you can see that, right? That's amazing stuff. Like, he's going to be totally biased. He's being paid by these companies. So this is always interesting. It's not only what was said, but who said it and why did they say it. Well, there you know that's going to be a biased slant. Okay, so this week I ask you not to eat 3 hours before bed. Eat your fruits and vegetables and walk and complete your journal assignments and your workbook assignments. Did anybody struggle with any of these? Did anybody learn anything about their ability to eat vegetables, which is probably our biggest challenge, because those are the foods that really heal us. Those are the foods that we tend to like the least. Anybody having experience with vegetables that was insightful or eye-opening or maybe helpful for the group, or fruits? Good or bad? Okay. Well, let's move on to what we really need to talk about. Okay, so we talked about your blood work, right? And hopefully, as you saw that presentation, you have a better understanding of what your blood levels mean as you're going through comparing your numbers to what the normal ranges are. And the key here is I'm trying to show you that this normal range is normal, but it doesn't mean it's the only range you can have. So you can be a little bit outside this range and it can still be healthy for you. So don't get all bent out of shape if you got a BUN that's a little bit on the high side, because almost everybody does. That means you were dehydrated because of the fast, and that's why that went up. If you don't want to see that number be high next time, after a fast, before you go donate your blood, drink 16 ounces of water, and you'll probably see that number be normal. But in the workbook, there's 3 or 4 pages that goes down through each one of these blood tests and explains what they mean. So if you still are confused, use that as a reference. And if that doesn't satisfy you, then talk to me about it. But most of what you need is in the workbook to help you understand these. Then another point I wanted to make, again, is that your normal may be a little bit above or below. One of the things that's really important is that when you get these community health screens or you get blood tests that you're looking at, compare it from one year to the next. Make sure there's not much of a big change, because you can be in the normal range but have a change in those ranges that could be a clue to maybe something happening that you need to know about. And then the last point on this slide is when we talk about hormones in week 11, you never want your hormones to be on the low end of normal. You want your hormones on the high end of normal, because that's where a 20-year-old would be. So that is one exception, is the hormones should be high normal. Okay, so this is a quick review. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. Environmental triggers, you can see that as far as cancer goes, these are the environmental triggers for cancer. It's not genetics. If you look at the genetics contribution, it's very small. If I get the wrong color coding, let me know, because sometimes my color blindness fails me, but I think that's 6% is genetic, right? So 94% of cancer is environmental. These are the triggers. So we have to understand that we have a lot more power over preventing cancer than what we realize, but we have to understand what those triggers are, how to avoid them, or how to clean them out of our bodies if we've been exposed to them. This was an article that I came across in I think it was the Journal of American Medical Association. Yeah, it was a couple years ago, and it was talking about the role of obesity in cancer. And so they've identified 13 cancers that you're more predisposed to if you're overweight or obese, which almost all of us are overweight or obese. There's not too many people that are normal weight, and there's even fewer that are underweight. But again, if you get one of these cancers, it doesn't mean it's because you're obese or overweight. But when you are overweight, your body is very inflamed. And the more overweight you are, the more inflammation you have, and the harder it is for your body to heal. Your body fights cancer with the immune system. So you want your immune system to be working really well. And if you're overweight, you're stressing that immune system. Okay, and then we talked about heart disease. That's the leading cause of death in the United States. And hopefully I explained that well enough on the videos that we showed. This is showing you what heart disease looks like. Now this is an aorta, the biggest artery in the body. It goes right off the heart and down the front of the spine. This is a normal looking artery, nice and smooth and soft and perfect color. This is like a 5-year-old child who hasn't been exposed to the stuff we have been. This is a teenager. These are the fatty streaks, the beginning of atherosclerotic plaque. And then this is what probably the typical adult looks like. And actually this is flipped upside down, because this should be on the bottom. Where the artery splits is actually where your artery splits at the level of your belly button. So one artery goes to the leg, each leg. But you can see there's a lot of plaque here, and I'll show you later what that plaque looks like, but it's calcified, and sometimes this can break off as the blood is squirting through, and that can cause a blood clot. So if this process happens in your brain, it's a stroke. If it happens in your heart, it's a heart attack. I had a patient today. He came in the emergency room recently, and he just had a little chest pain. He's diabetic, and he's not very compliant. He doesn't check his blood sugars. He doesn't really watch them. His blood pressure, he doesn't worry about it too much. He's just a real happy guy. Nothing bothers him. Had a little chest pain, so we said we ought to watch overnight. Well, his enzymes jumped overnight, so he had to be transferred. And his heart cath recently showed that he had 99% blockages in all 3 of the major coronary arteries. He's really lucky to be alive, and he's mid-60s. Just going along life, just retired, having fun, not worrying about his health, and he's lucky to be alive. His problem is because he doesn't understand the things that we talked about this week. Because if you understand this, you can really reduce your risk of heart disease and having this be your outcome. Okay, so that's what that plaque looks like. And that happens not just in your heart, it's in every blood vessel in your body. Every artery in the body will look like that over time. The question is how much? Do you have a little bit or do you have a lot? So we talk about when you come in with chest pain or I'm worried about your heart, I have to look at your major risk factors, which is family history, for sure is the number one. Strong family history. Somebody, a first degree relative before the age of 65 has a heart attack, you're automatically high risk. We got to watch that. And then diabetes is a risk factor, smoking, those three put you at really high risk. Two of those are high risk. You don't mess around with somebody with two of these who's having a little chest discomfort or indigestion. Your suspicion is very high that there's something going on. High blood pressure can contribute, but number 5 should be way down on the list. If you just have high cholesterol, don't worry about having a heart attack. I mean, you should not be jumping on cholesterol medicines just because somebody wants to treat a number and make it come down. Then we have the secondary causes, just so you understand where these are, because they're not as important as those top 5. But the high C-reactive protein, because I think we measured this in you guys, right? You saw those numbers, and you heard me say on the earlier video, don't panic if it's really high. Everybody's going to panic. But if your number is between 3 and 10 on this high CRP, you got too much inflammation in your body, and that means the arteries are inflamed, making you more susceptible for atherosclerotic buildup. So we want you to fix this. If you change your diet and you consider some good supplements, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks, you'll see that number come down, and you can have that checked at the end of the program to see that it's better. So high CRP levels, high insulin levels are inflammatory. So I'm not talking about a diabetic. I'm talking about somebody who likes a lot of sugar, likes a lot of carbs. They're not losing weight, they may be slowly gaining weight. And we measure your fasting insulin and it's high. High fasting insulin tells your body, you're making fat today. I don't care what you eat, we're helping you make fat. And fat is very inflammatory. It propagates all the bad things from cancer to heart disease. Visceral obesity, that big belly. What's wrong with the belly is not that your stomach is stretched. What's wrong with it is that you have visceral fat that lays on top of your intestines like an apron. That's really bad inflammatory fat. The whole body gets inflamed. Your arthritis pain can hurt more. Your C-reactive level will go up. Your insulin level will go up. But all those things reverse as you lose that belly fat. Visceral fat raises your insulin, so you're going to want to make more fat the bigger your belly is, and it lowers your nitric oxide level. So this is why a lot of men have erectile dysfunction. They just got too much of a belly, and that lowers the nitric oxide. It doesn't allow your blood vessels to dilate. You can't either achieve or maintain an erection without adequate blood flow. Inactivity also can put you at risk for heart disease, because if you're not active, your insulin level is probably higher and your nitric oxide level is probably lower. Then elevated homocysteine is another really important one that we don't measure here, but you could have your doctor or provider measure for you. It's a kind of a complicated biochemistry. It's actually not real complicated, but if this is too high, homocysteine injures the lining of your arteries. You want this to be low. You want to be ideally below 8. And if it's high, it's putting you at risk for heart disease, as both of my parents were high. For probably 50 years theirs was high and they didn't know about it. All you do to fix this, for most people, is take a B complex vitamin every day, and that'll bring that down, and then that risk factor is pretty much gone. I'll show you in a couple of weeks how I had a high level and how I got it down, so it's not a risk for me. Type A personality, because it raises the stress hormone cortisol, which makes you insulin resistant, which gives you more inflammation and makes you tend to gain more weight. And then hormone insufficiency, whether it's you're a man with low testosterone or you're a menopausal woman with low estrogen, when these hormones are low, they increase your risk of heart disease. I think I said this, if we do a complete hysterectomy on a 30-year-old, take her ovaries out, she has hot flashes for a couple of years, her risk of heart disease is going to go way up by the time she's 50, because estrogen is very protective to her heart, and she hasn't had it. if we do a prostatectomy or remove the prostate or we remove the gonads, testicles from a man at the age of 30 and don't replace his testosterone, he may not even be alive in 20 years because his risk of heart disease goes way up, osteoporosis goes way up, his depression is often life-threatening. It's that bad. Suicidal problems are really high when you do that to men. And we do that to every prostate cancer survivor. We kill the prostate cancer and then we drive down the testosterone to nothing. And they're extremely depressed, very fatigued. Their bladder is leaking. They lose all hope. They lose muscle. There's no drive. It's the worst, one of the worst things we do in medicine. And there's no evidence that it's going to shorten their life. It's going to definitely impair their quality of life. Okay, so then we showed you this picture of low nitric oxide levels. I mentioned that nitric oxide is made in the arteries, but as you get older, you make less, so you can't dilate blood vessels. These are the consequences of low nitric oxide levels. All of these. You can even see cancer risk goes up. So men, how do you know if you got good nitric oxide levels? If you have good nighttime erections, you're doing good. If they're gone, you're having an issue with it. If you can't sustain an erection once you start it, you're having a problem with it. Now, it's not as easy for women to know, but actually Dr. Bryan, who taught this, said low nitric oxide levels causes erectile dysfunction in men and women. And I thought, what do you mean women? Well, yes, women. No volunteers, but some of you probably could say, yes, I've noticed this. When you're 20 and you're aroused, your clitoris is very engorged and very sensitive and arousable. When you're 50 or 60, it doesn't respond the same as it used to. So harder to get aroused, harder to have that same sensation, and it's not as big as it used to be. It's the female counterpart. It's the same physiology. Lack of blood flow there prevents it from getting big and sensitive. So if you're having arousal issues, it may be because you got a blood flow problem. If your blood pressure is going up, you've got an issue with nitric oxide. That's how you fix it, to try to stay off the medicine, is fix the nitric oxide problem. So this is a slide that kind of shows you there's two ways you make nitric oxide. One is you make it through this amino acid precursor called L-arginine, and people will sell this in health food stores. This is not the problem for making this. The problem with making nitric oxide is that this enzyme doesn't work. So you can take all the L-arginine you want, that's not going to fix it, but people are making money on it because they know biochemistry, it makes sense. That's not the issue. We don't lack L-arginine. We have a problem with enzyme not working, and if that doesn't work, we can't make nitric oxide. So that's 50% is made in the body if this enzyme is working well. The other 50% comes from our diet. And I mentioned, I think in the presentation, that we should eat 300 milligrams a day of nitrite, but most of us are less than 150 a day. So where do you get nitrite? You get it from green leafy vegetables, and we don't eat that. So when you chew up those green leafy vegetables really well, you extract the nitrate in those vegetables, and then you have an enzyme in your mouth, the back of your mouth. You have bacteria that convert the nitrate into nitrite, the nitrite. Sorry, it gets really confusing. Let me go here. Okay, so that enzyme is defective, but here's something that we do. See, we think we're so smart because we don't have a bad breath, so let's use mouthwash. Well, you kill the bacteria, these bacteria right here on your tongue. You kill those bacteria with mouthwash, and you kill them when you scrub the back of your tongue because you're trying to get rid of anything that would cause bad breath. So now you can't make nitrite. So you've blocked your ability to make nitric oxide from your diet. If you don't do that, and you swallow the food, you're eating the right foods and you're not using mouthwash, but you swallow it, then the problem is if you're using acid blockers because you got heartburn, and your stomach is not acidic, you can't make the conversion from nitrite to nitric oxide. So whether you're taking Tums all the time, or you're taking Zantac, Pepcid, or Nexium, or Omeprazole, or Prilosec, all those things impair your ability to make nitric oxide. So this leads to high blood pressure, heart disease, erectile dysfunction in men and women, and all those other things that I showed you. Okay, so this is what nobody's teaching. All we're saying is here's something for your erectile dysfunction. Here's a blood pressure pill, and not helping you get the biochemistry back to its native state. Okay, this is the same pathway again, but what I'm showing you here is there's 8 cofactors that run that enzyme. There's a lot of things that have to happen. And I know this is really complicated, but let me just show you a couple things. This is the enzyme that is defective. My enzyme here is only 60% effective. My parents have the same defect. Some of you have that defect. So if this isn't working well, this is like a cogwheel. It's churning this way, churning this way, churning this way. And look at the downstream effect if you have that problem. Let's see if I can make this work. If this doesn't churn forward, then you get a backup of homocysteine, which you don't want. And how do you fix that? How do you get rid of this so this doesn't build up? Well, I'll show you right at the end. So when this enzyme is working here, nitric oxide synthase, this is working, guess what you make? You make nitric oxide. So I'm going back and forth. This has to be working, and this has to work to drive this all forward. Okay, so how do I fix this problem? These vitamins and minerals are required to run these pathways, required to run this pathway and this pathway. So these are all B vitamins. So that's one of the reasons I'm telling you, all of you, to take a B complex every day. Don't question me on it, just do it. But now you know why, right? It's not just because I want you to take a B vitamin. You don't have to take a B12 separately. Take one vitamin, a B complex, and fix those problems. Help fix this problem, fix this to drive it forward. My mom and dad had the same defect I had, and they didn't do anything about it for 30, 40 years. And in their late 70s, they both ended up with open heart surgery. It wasn't an early heart disease, it was a delayed heart disease. So this is pretty simple. Would it surprise you? I know, hopefully, I guess this is recorded, but I don't care. Would it surprise you if I told you my dad had erectile dysfunction because he was asking me for Viagra when he was 85? I mean, good for dad. He's at 85 asking for Viagra, right? But would you be surprised that, if he's had heart disease and he's had a defect here that hasn't been addressed, that he was having issues? I can predict. If you've had open heart surgery because, you've got blockages, I can almost guarantee you this whole pathway is bad. And I can almost guarantee you that you've had erectile dysfunction either as a man or a woman before this happened. Okay, so it's just a clue, but it's a blood flow problem because of vitamin and mineral deficiency and the wrong foods. Okay, so we talked about nitric oxide. This is the lozenge that you can get. Maybe I'll post this on a Facebook page. It's a short little video, and Kelly, you can maybe remind me to do this. It'll show you that 10 minutes after taking this lozenge, the blood vessels in the body dilate, and it increases blood flow by 34%. That's huge. If those blood vessels dilate, your blood pressure comes down. If they dilate, you have more blood flow to your brain, clearer thinking. If they dilate, you have more blood flow to your genitals, better sexual response and arousal. So Dr. Nathan Bryan is the one who developed this. He's at Baylor, University in Texas. Research is excellent. Any cardiologist that watches this would be using this for every patient. Anybody with high blood pressure, this is what you should take. Okay, so you take it twice a day for the first month and then once a day. I say try it for 3 months total and see if you feel like it helps you, because it's not cheap. But if it helps you, this is restoring natural physiology. It fixes everything, or it can help fix everything. Now, if you're not eating the right foods and you still got a big gut and you're not exercising, you can't expect this to work miracles, right? But if you're on the right track and you need a little bit more help with your blood pressure, this is what I tell people to take. I had a guy on oxygen in his 70s, 3 liters oxygen. He couldn't breathe. I said, this will help you get more blood flow to your lungs. You should breathe better. 3 weeks later, he comes in. He said, thanks for those supplements, Doc. said, I'm breathing better. My little friend there, he's sticking up now. I'm like, wow, you got it. You really benefited from this. It's not everybody that can say that, but it's. I'm trying to show you the biochemistry and why this can work. So the point here is, if you're interested, Google Dr. Bryan. Just do Neo 40 and Nathan Bryan and watch some of his short videos. You'll see what I'm talking about here. There's a 55-minute video that's incredible. It's more for clinicians. So if you want your doctor to watch it, have them watch it, because the science is phenomenal. Okay, so, and I mentioned that estrogen and testosterone protect the heart, right? You take those away, your risk of heart disease goes up. Women that have a hysterectomy in their early 40s, 7 times the risk of heart disease, unless you fix that. Men with low testosterone are at increased risk for heart disease. Men make estrogen from testosterone, and estrogen is really protective to the blood vessels.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you have a hysterectomy in your 50s, does that risk increase?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the longer you go without estrogen, the more the risk is increased. So I would feel terrible for a 30-year-old that had a hysterectomy and never got estrogen. But it's not quite the same at 50, but you can fix this at any age. My dad's been on it for 10, 15 years, and he stopped using it. And then his testosterone levels were like, he was being treated for prostate cancer. There was nothing there. He could hardly get out of bed. I mean, he was sick in March, could hardly get out of bed. He was very weak, had to do a lot of physical therapy. I said, no more cream for you, Dad. You get a shot every week. So now his levels are up. He's walking, he's doing things. He did probably 40 push-ups Saturday because Ohio State scored a bunch of points. Okay, so if you ask Dr. Yes?
Back to that hormone and estrogen, how about if you have early menopause in your 40s, which is, and no problems, but I haven't had any hormones or estrogen or whatever.
Yeah.
They bother me.
Yeah. So a lot of people go through menopause and they're not miserable with hot flashes and night sweats, and they think, I don't really need it.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you don't, because you're not symptomatic. But to protect your heart and your bones and all those other things, you should do it. The problem is doctors are afraid of it. They're going to tell you it'll cause breast cancer and clots and heart attacks and strokes. And it will if you use Prempro, which is, we'll talk about this in week 11. But the natural estrogen that matches your body is not going to cause those problems. If you take too much, you're going to feel like you're having PMS. If you take even the right molecule, too much is going to make you feel bad. But the right amount might not make you feel much better, but it will protect your heart. It will protect your bones. It will protect your brain.
So if you don't take any, and now, just this side 70.
Yeah.
So from 40 to for 30 years, is it too late?
It's never too late, but it's always better to start earlier. It might be hard to convince you to do that if you start taking it. You don't really feel any different because you don't really feel that bad right now. It's like taking a supplement. Why? I told you to take a B complex, so you take it for a month, and you're like, yeah. He said something about I need to take this. I don't remember why, and it makes my urine turn really yellow, which it does, and it costs me money. It's a hassle, and it kind of stinks. I'm not going to take it. So you're off of it now. It's 10 years with none. It's hard to take something long term unless you can feel the benefits. But I want you to understand why these things are good. Okay, so this was another article that's saying there is evidence that suggests added sugar to your diet, not salt, is the culprit for high blood pressure. Sugar causes more inflammation. Sugar probably blocks nitric oxide production, which raises your blood pressure. It's not, salt doesn't lower it that much. Salt restriction, that is. Okay, and then here's another one that says, we observed a significant relationship between added sugar and increased risk for heart disease, mortality, dying from a heart attack. The more sugar, the higher risk of heart disease. This was an association, a relationship. Associations and relationships aren't causative. You cannot say, based on that statement, high sugar causes heart disease. But people will jump to that conclusion. An association and a relationship are not cause-effect. All right. This is just talking about abdominal obesity and heart disease. The longer you have a big gut, the more progression of heart disease you can develop. Okay, so this is I want to tell you about Randy King. Randy was an OBGYN. I met him at a conference about 10 years ago. We hit it off. It was a hormone conference. And at this hormone conference, we were all convinced by Dr. Rouzier, he's the god of the hormone universe. He's excellent. He suggested that testosterone will protect you from heart disease, just like I mentioned estrogen would too. So Randy was a big proponent of this. So he'd been on testosterone. He's 55 here, 56 maybe. And he's this really busy OBGYN down in Lexington, Kentucky. I mean, he's delivering babies. He's doing oncology surgery in women. He's got a hormone clinic. His new bride here, they've just been married a couple of years. She's a nurse practitioner, and she's doing cosmetic stuff. And they got this booming business, making a ton of money. He is always on the go, type A personality. So I was at this conference, and I talked to his wife on Friday night for about an hour and a half. She's like, yeah, Randy's always on the go, blah, blah, blah. He's enjoying this, but he's still doing all these things. So Saturday, I was the keynote speaker for lunch, and I was sitting at his table, and I said, hey, Randy, I talked to your wife. You probably ought to quit delivering babies. I mean, why would you do that? You've done enough of that. Slow down a little bit and focus on some things that really have meaning for you right now. He's like, yeah, I probably need to do that. I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends. Sunday morning, we come back to conference, and Dr. Rouzier stands up and welcomes us here, and he says, I'm sorry to tell you this sad news, but Randy King died last night in his hotel room. So we were all shocked. So here's the story. Randy he's got a little bit of a gut, but not real big. And he's on testosterone. He looks healthy. I think he had diabetes. It was not particularly well controlled. And I think he had a family history of heart disease. He went out to eat, comes back from dinner, and he told his wife, he said, where's the junk food? Well, we don't have any junk food here in the hotel. Well, let's go down the street to the convenience store and get my junk food. So he goes down and he gets chips and candy and pop. He comes back and he eats it. About 11 o'clock, he lays down on the bed, tells his wife, I don't feel very good. And he goes into a seizure on the bed. And his wife can't get him to stop, can't get him to arouse. So she runs out of the hotel room and she's banging on doors down the hall because the hotel's full of doctors. They come running back to the room, and she forgot her key, so she couldn't get back in. They had to wait for security. Make a long story short, he died of a massive heart attack, and right there in this room. So the person running the conference, who I know, she gave me the inside story on this. She said, I was up all night with his wife. We were talking about how to contact his kids, how to get the body back, how to tell everybody what am I going to do, all this stuff. And she said, and you wouldn't believe the junk that I found in that room. The pop, the candy, the sweets. I mean, it's just everywhere. So this is like a tragic story, but the message is, it's not just hormones. The message is, it's food. Food is what protects you more than anything. We want the quick things. Give me the testosterone, because I can do that. But to give up my candy and my pop and my other stuff, I'm just going to use my testosterone, because he said, well, sometimes we hear what we want to hear, we take the easy way out. The hard thing is eating the right foods. The hard thing is eating vegetables when they don't taste good. There's nothing about them you like, but they're the foods that heal. All right, so then we talked about, okay, this is the portion that we didn't talk about. So I'm going to walk you through how our diet has changed over the last 100 years to show you how it led to what happened to Randy. Okay, so this is our changing diet. I'm not going to read this because you can all read this, but let's talk about the first change in our diet that we thought was harmless. It was actually really bad, and that is the story about enriched flour. So this is looks like Wonder Bread. I'm not sure what brand it is, but it's extra thin white bread. And you'd think, well, I know I shouldn't eat a lot of bread. It's hard to lose weight, but otherwise that's not going to be harmful for me. If I just have 2 pieces of toast in the morning, it's not a big deal. Okay, so this is wheat nutrition. So the flour that comes from the wheat kernel is this part right here. It's the endosperm. 83% by weight of a wheat kernel has the white flour. Then you have a small fraction, 2.5% by weight is the germ. That's where all the healthy oils are, the vitamins and minerals. That's where the nutrition is. And then you have the bran layer that is so good for our bowels, and then you have the husk, which is the shell. So in the milling process, we chuck off the husk, and in the early 1900s, if you were on a farm, you would grow this wheat and you would get the husk off and you would grind this wheat up and you would make your wheat bread. So you're getting what nature wants you to have: the fiber, the wheat germ with all the nutrients, and the white flour, which is where the calories are. But what happened was at the Industrial Revolution, when people started moving off of the farms into the cities to be part of the car industry and all the other things that were happening, they weren't eating their own food. They were allowing somebody else to feed them. So now you've got these local grocers who are feeding people. And when they did this, when they ground up the wheat from the farm, and they made this bread with the wheat germ in it, it went rancid pretty quick because the oil in here would react with oxygen. It would just go bad. So they learned how to take this out and mill this, so the wheat germ was removed, and they removed the fiber or the bran. So now you just have this endosperm, which is the white flour, and that had a better shelf life, and it tasted pretty good. But the problem is when you throw this out and you throw the bran out, you develop nutritional deficiencies. And so by 1936, we found that Americans were deficient in these vitamins and minerals because we were eating a lot of bread. I don't know if I think I showed you the slide earlier that the average American was eating 300 pounds of wheat or grain a year, right? In 1900. That was our primary staple. So most of our nutrition was coming from grain. So, so rather than say through this process, you got to add this back, or you can't stop this, the Enrichment Act was passed to say, okay, you got to add these 4 back because you're throwing them out right here with the wheat germ. You got to add them back. Okay, that sounds like that makes good sense. Let's put them back. But if you look at this closer, this shows you with a whole grain wheat, you're getting 100% of the nutrients that nature intended you to have. When you take out the bran and the wheat germ, you can see all the nutritional deficiencies you've created, right? Look at that. I mean, there's only 2% of the niacin. When you use enriched flour, which is the mandate from the 1942 Act of Congress that I just mentioned, you're getting 83% of the iron. That was mandated. You got to add that back. They didn't get 100%, but they got most of it. You got the thiamine and riboflavin, and you got the niacin. So those are all mandated, but the magnesium level is still really low. The zinc level is not very impressive. The folic acid level, that wasn't added back, and the fiber wasn't there. And then we're not even talking about other trace elements and minerals that aren't recorded on this slide. So when you see white bread or enriched flour, it's enriched because by law we have to add these back. That's the law. That's the Enrichment Act law. But everything else is not there like it should be. So anything that's enriched is deficient in key micronutrients. So we'll talk about those micronutrients. I'll go over that again when we talk about supplements. But magnesium and folic acid and the B vitamins, we're going to talk a lot more about that. So that was a problem. So when you see enriched, processed flour, just know that it's deficient. It's not really enriched. So that was the first mistake that we made. Okay, second mistake is we started eating an imbalanced amount of fats. So we have essential fats, omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. We have to have I think the ratio, it's been a while, I think it's a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Do you guys know which one of these is the bad one? 6, excellent. You either watched it or you just knew it. Most of us kind of know omega-6 is bad because we know omega-3 is good, right? It's not that it's bad. The problem is we don't get enough of this. So this is where you get the omega-3 fatty acids. I mean, flax seeds, navy beans, pecans, salmon, leafy greens, winter squash. Yeah, that looks like, that's what a healthy, nutritious-minded person would eat. Versus this stuff, which is very tempting, right? We've all probably done a pretty good job with these foods, but they're very high in omega-6 fatty acids. And if you get too much of these, they're very inflammatory. And you don't want inflammatory foods in your diet. And then there's a problem with trans fatty acids, which is a man-made fatty acid that causes additional problems. So here's a little bit on trans fats. What they do is they allow us to add, we can take liquid fats and put them in a semi-solid condition to prolong their shelf life. That's why we have this technology to make trans fats. We can make a Hostess apple pie and stick it in a vending machine, and those fats in that apple pie are trans fats. They're not going to go rancid. So that can sit there in a package for 6 months. It'll taste the same. So it's perfect for the food companies, right? Because if they don't sell this year or this month, it'll sell later and still taste decent. That's why we have trans fats. There's nothing wrong with the concept, but the idea of putting a trans fat in our body that doesn't match our body chemistry, that's the problem. So they're chemically altered fats, and they're not found in nature. So that's always a clue. If you're giving me a chemical not found in nature, that could be a problem. Like Prempro causing breast cancer in women, that's not found in nature. Those two molecules are not found anywhere in nature, but we put them in our bodies because they do control hot flashes. Okay, but these trans fats will increase your risk of heart disease and some cancers like prostate cancer. So these are, let's see if I can get through this here. So this is nature's way to make a fat. You see how these two hydrogens are on this side of the double bond? When it's the opposite side, that's trans. That's not found in any plant, any animal, any organism. That should not be in our body. But when that gets incorporated into our cell membranes, it alters the way the cells communicate, and that's a problem. So nature says, yeah, you can give me this, I'll take oleic acid, I know what to do with that. But if I change this and I flip this hydrogen, put it on this side through hydrogenation, this doesn't have a long shelf life, but that does. But the body doesn't know what to do with that, and that is not supposed to be in our body, and that causes lots of problems. So then we have a couple different types of fats. We have saturated fats, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats. So the saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature. So most of these are solid. Coconut oil is not solid at room temperature, but it has a lot of saturated fat. It has a little bit of the omega-6 fats. Butter is another one that's mostly saturated. That's why it's room temperature, it's solid. Okay, and then you see the other ones. And then we have the monounsaturated. That means one double bond. Olive oil, canola oil, and peanut oil. But the key here is look at the ratios of the omega-6s to omega-3s. So let me show you what we're looking for here. The ideal ratio is 4 omega-6s to 1 omega-3. Which one of those looks good to you? Olive oil is excellent. And then canola oil has a pretty good ratio too, right? What do you think about peanut oil? It doesn't. It's not really great. So does that mean you shouldn't eat peanuts? Or not use peanut oil in your cooking?
Don't use peanut oil in your cooking. I'm gonna eat peanuts.
You could eat, yeah, you can eat peanuts. It's not that you can't. But I'm just showing you how these contribute. Okay, now these vegetable oils, these are a real problem. Can you see why they're a problem? See all the omega-6 in there? So, and remember I said this is inflammatory. These are high levels. So you can do this experiment really easily. Go home and make a batch of chocolate chip, or not, of brownies. In the brownie recipe that I've used, it's 1 egg and a cup of vegetable oil. So you dump a cup of vegetable oil in there, and then you can't just have one brownie, have 3 or 4, just enjoy it. Have 3 or 4 nice sizes. And then see what these omega-6 fatty acids do. Whoops, shoot. See what those omega-6 fatty acids do to your arthritis, because you'll feel it the next day. Your body will be inflamed. You'll be retaining water, your eyes will be puffy, you have blurry vision, your joints are gonna hurt. That's dangerous. We don't want that. So we want to try to stay away from these. It doesn't mean that you can't have them every now and then, but you really don't want to use these in your cooking, because your C-reactive protein, your inflammatory markers, are not going to come down if you continue to put these in your diet. So these are much better foods to cook with, and these are better foods to eat as well. Avocados would also be up in this range with a nice blend of omega-6 and omega-3. Okay, so our diets isn't balanced compared to, almost 200 years ago, because 200 years ago we were eating fish, which is high in omega-3. We weren't eating fast foods. We weren't eating vending machine foods then. That wasn't available where all the omega-6s are. And but now we're eating a lot more, and we're not eating vegetables. If you had a farm 200 years ago or 100 years ago, you're going to be eating a lot of tomatoes and radishes and things out of the garden, like nature intended you to have. But now, most of us don't really have acquired a taste for that. McDonald's has got a really good deal on. You get some really tasty food very cheap. Okay, but our inflammatory intake has doubled since 1850 because these are the things we're eating. Now, if you remember, so we're talking about grain-fed meat here. What's grain-fed meat? What kind of oil is that in grain-fed meat? What are the animals, the cows eating?
Soybean, probably.
Soybean, and what else? So soybean, a lot of omega-6, and corn, right? A lot of omega-3. So if it's a cow that's eating on a pasture, they're eating grass, and they're going to get a lot more omega-3. So they're not going to be as juicy because they don't have as much fat, but they're a lot healthier animal, just like a deer. Deer is a much healthier meat to eat than a grain-fed cow. So how are you going to feel if you eat a 12-ounce steak on a Friday night? Oops. How are you going to feel the next day? How should you feel?
You'll feel like your body.
You should feel inflamed, right? You shouldn't feel necessarily great. Okay, so this is the ratio. Our current ratio is not 4-to-1, it's 10-to-1, is up as high as 20-to-1. Way too much omega-6, not enough omega-3, which comes from plants, because we don't eat plants. We eat the stuff that tastes good. Go to restaurants, fast food, vending machines, processed foods, Triscuits and wheat thins and all those things they're laden with trans fats. And we're going to do an exercise on food labels, and you'll really start to see this when you start looking for it. Okay, so I'm not going to bother to read that. Third problem is high fructose corn syrup.
Why is that in everything? Geez.
Did you hear Marilyn's question? Why is it in everything? Does anybody know why?
It's cheap. I know
It's
that.
cheap.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. So let's say you've developed a soft drink. You got this unique flavor of a soft drink, and you want to sell it, but it needs some sweetener. Now, have you ever tried just making Kool-Aid? You put a little Kool-Aid mix in a glass. I know you don't normally do it that way, but if you put some in and maybe 2 tablespoons of sugar, you remember what that's like? It's really hard to get the sugar to dissolve, right? So the food companies have the same problem. And high fructose corn syrup is so much cheaper to make, and 2 or 3 drops of high fructose corn syrup is like 2 tablespoons of sugar, and it goes right into solution. It's cheaper, it's easier. Why wouldn't the food manufacturers want to use high fructose corn syrup? So does anything look natural, about this process? Hang on a second here. This is made from cornstarch. You start with corn, and this is the process to get your high fructose corn syrup. Anything look natural about that? Does nature do anything like that to give you that product? No. So that just makes it simple. If nature's not doing it, it's probably not going to be best for your body. But can you see why it's in food now? It's a great way to sweeten the food. It's cheap. It's economical. Why wouldn't you use it if you're a food manufacturer? But why would you consume it if you're trying to be healthy? Because hopefully you have a feel for what high fructose corn syrup can do to you. Here's a graph showing you our food intake of high fructose corn syrup when they started to develop the technology in the 70s, mid to late 70s, and then the sugar consumption went up. This is the total number of pounds of sugar per capita. So we're up over, probably most of us are over 100 pounds of sugar a year, which is way too much. And a lot of it comes from high fructose corn syrup. Then this graph shows you, these are the obesity rates that we talked about, first class, and then this is the pounds of sugar consumed. Most of this, from this point on, is high fructose corn syrup. So can you see where the obesity is coming from now? The point is it's coming from high fructose corn syrup. And what does it do? It turns on your insulin. It makes your body say, we got to make fat. And once that happens, you're going to do a really good job of making fat. Then there's a lot of sugars in disguise. When you read a food label, you're like, I don't even know what some of these things are. I don't know what that is. What's levulose? And we have different types of corn syrups. They're all different forms of high fructose corn syrup. What if you pick up a loaf of wheat bread and you're looking to see what kind of sugar's on the label, and you come down and it says natural sweeteners, and you're thinking, oh, this got to be honey, agave nectar, right? No, there's no legal definition for this. So,
Not anything we know.
yeah, not anything you know. So it can be anything. So are the food labels telling us everything we need to know? Or are they trying to sell a product? Because that's misleading. Natural makes you think it must be good for you, right? So you really have to be careful with these foods. Okay, and then this is just another from another journal, another study that I came across, that obesity is an inflammatory state, and they did a study on people who were obese. Their C-reactive proteins were high. They come down when you lose weight. And if you reduce your calories by 1,000 calories a day for 4 weeks, you'll see a significant reduction in those inflammatory markers that were measured, like C-reactive protein. And what does it say? Over time, there's a reduction in the cumulative risk of Alzheimer's disease. This talks about sugar and cognitive decline. Higher hemoglobin A1Cs, which is a measure of long-term sugar control, is associated with, it's not cause-effect, it's associated with lower cognitive function. Try that when you're having 4 brownies tonight. Get that experiment out of the way. So I want you to do that sometime when you're having a bad day. Don't stop with 1. Just really load up. And then ask yourself, is my thinking clearer or more fuzzy after 4 brownies? Because it will be more fuzzy. You won't want to function, and you'll hurt more. And hopefully that'll be enough to convince you, I'm not going to do this anymore. Yes?
But you can make brownies and cutlet, no eggs, no oil, no water, and a can of black beans.
Yes.
Drained,
Yes.
rinsed and pulverized.
Yes.
Added to your brownie mix.
You could do that. You probably won't hurt as bad. Yeah. Yeah, you probably won't hurt as bad. But that doesn't make the point I'm trying to make. I want you to really be bad. That's later after you're really being healthy. Right now I'm trying to well, for some people it does. For others it's like, I know you put black beans in that and there's applesauce, I could taste it. I'm not going for that. I want the real thing. But I want you to get like she's talking about. That's where we want to be.
I put applesauce instead of oil too.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's pretty good.
That I can disguise.
Yes. So this is a prediabetes and brain atrophy. This was also a Family Practice News article. Brain changes suggestive of cerebral microvascular dysfunction. So too much sugar blocks nitric oxide, so you impair blood flow, and there's more inflammation. So if you're trying to keep your mind clear, you should not be eating a lot of sugar. This is a great slide and a good summary of all those 4 things I talked about: enriched flours, high fructose corn syrup, and trans fats. So this is still one of my favorite breads. Like if I have a egg salad sandwich, I might want to have this Italian white bread on with it. But look at the ingredients here. So it's made with enriched wheat flour. So what do you know when it says enriched? What does it mean? Deficient. That's, you just always know it's deficient. How can you prove that? Because they're telling you what they added back. Niacin, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, and folic acid. They didn't add back magnesium, molybdenum, zinc, all the other elements and minerals that should be there. So it's deficient. That's the most common ingredient in this particular. So it's micronutrient deficient, number one. Number two, the second leading compound by weight is water, and then they use high fructose corn syrup. Why would they do that? It's cheap and it gives it a little bit of a sweet taste. That's probably why I like it. I like sweet things. It's probably why you guys would like it too. And then, what kind of fat did they put in here? Partially hydrogenated soybean oil. So where do you find, this also means a trans fat. Where do you find that in nature?
You don't
Nowhere. What does that do?
clog your arteries.
It clogs, it's inflammatory. It clogs your arteries. It makes your body be in overdrive. You don't want to be already inflamed and come down with COVID, because COVID is going to really trigger inflammation. That's the problem with COVID. There's an over-inflammatory response. Your body's going haywire. If you're already inflamed by eating junk foods and being overweight and not doing the right thing, especially having diabetes, diabetics and morbidly obese are really at risk with COVID. They're already inflamed. And then the virus makes them inflame even more, and your chance of survival goes down. I've seen it. My sister-in-law has been on the vent for 2.5 weeks and is very likely to not pull through. She's 62 and she's been obese for quite a while. She's had a rough life. I don't think she wants to wake up to more of a rough life. So I'll have to let you know how that goes. But these things, this is how we get the inflammation down. So we got all three of those, right? Now, is that like the Chinese version of Let's Kill America? No. This is how we kill ourselves. This is like suicide. But none of us think of this as really being harmful. And I'm not going to criticize you if I see you eating this, a sandwich with white bread. But you don't want to do this very often, because you're going to pay a price. You can have a cheat meal a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, as long as everything else is really good. But these are the foods that combined cause us to have high cholesterol, heart disease, at risk for cancer, erectile dysfunction, obesity, diabetes, all those things, acid reflux. These are the problems. This is how subtle this can be. Okay, and then the fourth problem is most of us in America just eat too much, right? We have no idea what a serving size is. When I was a kid and I got ice cream, I get one or two scoops. Try giving your grandchild or your child a bowl of ice cream that looks like that. They're going to be like, where's the other carton? I got to have at least 2 different flavors, right? And you guys growing up in the 60s know what, you go to a vending machine and get a Coke that was like 8 ounces, a small little Coke. And now you can go to most gas stations, get a 64-ounce big gulp that you could take a bath in. I mean, I don't even know how you drink it without getting it down you. And then you go to Roadhouse and you can get a 16-ounce steak. That's enough to feed 4 people. And a lot of us will put half of that down. All of it. Yes. Good thing there's a mask on, because we don't really know who said that, right? Oh, that's really good honesty. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Caloric restriction begun later in life is effective as caloric restriction started later in life at doing a couple of things. So it doesn't matter when you start cutting your calories down. These are the benefits from eating less. Slows your mortality rate because it slows down that telomere shortening velocity. It extends your lifespan because, again, it's slowing that down. You're living longer. You're not going to be as sick. And it delays the onset or progression of cancer. Cancer loves sugar. Cancer loves excess calories. So starve it out. If you had cancer, the first thing I'd do is cut your sugar intake down to virtually nothing. And then I would eat a lot of vegetables and berries. Okay, so it's never too late to start. What about the person that says, now this is kind of my confession time, this is sort of where I'm going to keep eating the bad stuff, but I'm just going to exercise it off because I like to exercise. So is that as effective at lifespan? What do you think the answer is? No. It's always about food. Less food and moderate exercise is the key. It's not bad food, overeat, and then lots of exercise to keep it up. That's the biggest loser way. Well, the biggest loser way is they do eat better food, but they lose that weight because they're burning so many calories with exercise, and that's not sustainable once they're off the program. Okay, so here's our keys to nutrition, our declining health. Enriched flour, which is depleted. These trans fats, which are not found in nature, they're hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated. They cause heart disease. Too many omega-6s causing inflammation. And then too much high fructose corn syrup, which makes your insulin level go up, makes you gain weight. It makes you build fat. The other thing I didn't mention that is critical about this is high fructose corn syrup will make your ghrelin level go up. Ghrelin is a hormone in the brain that says feed me. And you don't want to be, you don't want that ghrelin level driving you crazy. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, you all probably know what that hormone feels like because on Thanksgiving Day you eat way too much, right? Too many breads and apple pie and pumpkin pie and all these carbs and sugars. And you go to bed thinking, I just ate twice the amount I should. My belly's going to blow up. I'm not going to have to eat for 2 or 3 days. And the next Friday morning, you're starving. You're like, I am starving. That is why you're starving right there, because you've raised ghrelin. When you start doing intermittent fasting and you keep your carb intake down, that signal goes way down and the insulin level goes down, so you start burning fat. So that is the key. So I put a few patients on Adipex, which is an appetite suppressant, and one girl today lost 10 pounds in a month. She's just like, I'm not hungry. I skip breakfast. I'm not really that hungry. But you can't prescribe that long term. I said, you get 3 months to lose some weight, but most importantly, what I hope happens in the end of 3 months is that hormone goes down to have no impact on you. So you're not hungry. And the insulin level drops, so that's why you're burning fat. But once she gets off the Adipex, if she goes back to toast and potatoes and candy and ice cream, that's going to jump right back up and it's going to drive her into eating. So that changes quickly, so you got to be really, really careful with that. The people that do intermittent fasting, some days they'll fast for 2 days in a row, 3 days, and they're not hungry. They have to remind themselves, we haven't eaten in 2 days, because that hormone has no effect on them. It's a very weak stimulus in their brain. Okay, so this is what I want you to do this week. Watch that, well, if you feel like you need to watch that segment we just covered, you can. So I want you to eliminate these 3 bad things in your diet: enriched, deficient flour products, high fructose corn syrup, and hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated trans fats. So go through your pantry and your refrigerator, look on the labels, and if you see these, throw the food out, and you'll find that you got barren cupboards and nothing in the refrigerator. You'll throw out your ketchup. I mean, there's going to be nothing left. So I'm not telling you have to do that, but I want you to start feeling guilty when you use ketchup and there's high fructose corn syrup in it. I want you to start realizing that's contributing to my appetite and to my weight and to my inflammatory state. Okay, so I think that's it. This week was how food makes us sick. Next week is how food helps us heal. Okay, so that'll be like, now we're going into the positive direction. Did you have something to say, Kelly?
No, I was going to help you with this.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to show you how some of this translates. Should I turn this mic off, Logan? No, leave it on? Okay.
How we'll do this, Logan. Just trying to get it where people at home can see too.
So how big should your heart be? Size of your fist. This is the size of my heart.
Oh, goodness.
So this is a heart that's a little bigger than it should be. Can we put it down on right here so that camera can see it? There we go. You might, if you need to come up, you come up, take a look at this later after we're done. So this is the aorta coming off the heart. So the blood's coming out right here, going to your body. And you see this and this. You see what these are? This is a vein. It's been grafted. This comes from the leg. So this is bypassing a blockage in this artery, and it was sewn right in down here. Right there is where it's sewn in. This is called the mammary artery. If you pick it up and they can't see it at home.
Yeah, but he is definitely.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is the mammary artery. It comes from the chest wall. This is an artery going to an artery. That's perfect. These veins aren't supposed to act as arteries, but that's the best we can do. Do you remember what I said about what often happens when we use a vein to bypass a blockage? A vein says, I'm supposed to be an artery, but I'm a vein. And what often happens to these within a couple months? They clot. See what's happened right here? Can you see? I don't know if you can see that. That's darker. If you feel that, that's a clot. So this was a 1, 2, 3, 4-way bypass with one of them already clotted off right there. That happens. And it hasn't fixed the disease. It's bypassed the heart disease. How do you fix this? How do you reverse this? Your diet, right? We just talked about it. Low carb, low sugar. You don't eat over calories. You don't eat transhydrogenated fats. Okay, so that's a bypass heart. And actually, we got 2 of these. This is another bypass graft. So we got a vein graft here that's dark. It's got a clot in it. This one is open. This one is open. And then one in the back is clotted. Okay, so 2 of the 4 have clotted off. The cool thing about this, if you have to almost have to come closer to see this, but right here you can see the stitches where they sewed this in, the aorta. It's pretty amazing. They stop the heart. You can't sew something in a heart that's beating, so it goes in a bypass machine to keep the person alive. So the heart stopped when they're doing this. So the story here, we have a little explanation. 55-year-old man with a long history of hypertension, diabetes, and smoking, admitted with increasing chest pain, 5 days later developed an inferior wall infarction, which meant probably right down here, it got plugged up again with cardiogenic shock and expired. Note that thrombotic occlusions, was on the back. This is why this person died. The blood flow was impaired in the back of the heart that went down to the bottom, and they died. The heart just gave up, died of cardiogenic shock. Okay, is there anything else on this? They had a 5-way bypass. Okay, that's it.
Where did you get these specimens? Oldman Hospital.
Okay, let's see if I can show you.
Should have normal one in there somewhere.
Yeah, it should be a normal, huh?
Big one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is you know what the yellow stuff is here? This is fat. Every organ should have some fat on it. Doesn't mean they were a fat person. It's just part of their natural cushioning. Right in the back here, see this right here? This is a prosthetic heart valve right there. Okay, so this is not natural. So what is this person going to have to take so they don't have a blood clot form here? Have to be on a blood thinner forever, right? Okay, so that's an aortic valve replacement. Yeah. Actually, there's 2. There's 2 aortic valves. You'd have to come up to see the one, but there's another one right here. If you can see in there, that's another valve replacement. Wow, there's a lot in here this time. This is fun. Okay, so this is an aortic valve and a mitral valve prosthetic replacement with a clot causing the ineffective valve closure. So I don't know if I'll be able to find that. Let's see. Where is this?
Oh, the sound is so nice.
Where is it?
I'm glad I have a mask on.
Oh, here it is. Oh, this is kind of cool here.
Ooh, geez, okay.
There's the valve, right? So it's metal, and you see there's a little valve that closes like that. You hear that? So it got a clot on it.
So that's why they hear the click.
Yeah, you sit next to this person in the movies, and you can hear click, click as this closes. Okay, so that is a prosthetic valve, and somehow they didn't have enough blood thinner, so a clot formed on it. Man, there's an awful lot. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah. Remember the fist-sized heart? How about that? This is what happens when your heart gets too big. Instead of squeezing really strong, it just gets sluggish. So you walk up a flight of steps and you need your heart to squeeze fast, and it just can't do it. So you get short of breath. And then you start building up fluid in your lungs, which are like a sponge. And the bottom of your lungs is full of fluid. You can't breathe, you get short of breath, and you don't feel good. So this says hypertensive heart disease secondary to chronic kidney failure. This is a kidney, one of the kidneys. It should be 3 times this size. This is like a non-functioning kidney. And you can see this heart is huge. I mean, it takes up a lot of space in the chest. It pushes the
Looks like a chicken.
yeah, it's pretty big. Yeah, so these are the natural heart valves right there. I'm putting my finger behind that, and it's calcified. It's real stiff. They're supposed to be paper thin, but this is not real thin.
Now, why did they slice it? Were they just studying it?
Yeah,
or-
that's just the autopsy, how they do it with an autopsy.
Oh.
All right, let's see here. Okay, this is what we want our aorta to look like. See how smooth that is?
Oh, yeah.
Light brown, that's beautiful. Okay, these little holes are where the arteries branch off of this. This is probably a 5-year-old because it's the size of a 5-year-old. So they wouldn't have a lot of heart disease yet. This is the beginning of, no, this is actually advanced atherosclerotic plaque here. Looks different than the other one, right? Severe aortic iliac graft, atherosclerotic, okay, ulcerated plaque. So right here is where the artery splits to go to your right leg and your left leg. And you see that funny looking graft in there? They had to sew that in because this person was so plugged up with plaque, they didn't get enough blood flow to their legs. So you're getting really a lot of leg pain and cramping pain because of the flow problem. So they had to sew that in. But when you look at this, you can see this is what atherosclerotic plaque looks like. And if you put gloves on, you can feel that it's kind of hard. There's another, I don't think I see an aneurysm in here, but often you'll see an aneurysm. They're pretty translucent, but I don't think there's one in this one. Maybe there's one in another one. Here's another one with atherosclerotic plaque. This is probably mild. Probably a lot of us have this. You know, if we're 60 years old and our cholesterol has been high for a while. But it's only a problem when a piece of this plaque breaks off and it gets shoved downstream into a narrow opening. I don't think there's any. Oh wait, yeah, here it is right here. This is the beginning of an aneurysm right there. Can you see where my thumb's pushing through? That's really thin. So that's starting to bulge. If that bulges too much and it ruptures, you're dead in about a minute because you just bleed to death really quick. Okay, so that's why we have to control your blood pressure really well when you start to develop an aneurysm like that. Okay, almost done. This is a teenager with some fatty streaks beginning. And then we have a couple of, what is that?
Ooh, geez.
I don't know what that is. Oh, that's a graph. Okay. Here is a liver slice. Somebody's got onions, I'm sure. There's slice of liver, right? It should be pink. So this is not quite pink, right? It's a little bit yellowish. Do you know what that is? It's fat. So when you look at your blood work and your AST and ALT are elevated, that means you probably have a fatty liver, and that's what your liver is going to look like. So the liver this is an inflamed liver when there's fat in it. So can we fix this? Yes. If you lose weight, this would go back to a nice healthy pink. If you don't, and that progresses, then your liver will look like this. Yes. It's got a cobblestone appearance. It's becoming hard and cirrhotic. And when your liver stops working, your liver is trying to detoxify poisons. And if you can't detoxify poisons, then the toxins build up and you just get real sleepy. And these people usually fall asleep and don't wake up when they're in liver failure. This is the point of no return. The fatty liver can go back to normal. The liver can regenerate itself until it's too far gone, and then it just doesn't function well. So again, it's this cobblestone appearance that says you're getting to end-stage kidney disease or liver disease. Okay, here's the last one. You have any more plates?
Some of this down. I think they gave me everything they had. Okay.
Okay, anybody want to guess what this is? Keep going higher. There's always somebody in the gutter at the prostate. Nope, higher than that. Next to the heart. Lungs. This is a piece of the lung.
Oh, goodness.
Now, this is real soft. It's real spongy and squishy. You can squeeze the water out.
It's not normal.
Well, yeah, so you can see it's a little dark here. That is probably maybe from a little bit of secondhand smoke exposure and maybe a little bit of environmental pollution. Someone who's a smoker will have this black stuff all through their lungs. And I don't know if you can see this very well, but right here, you guys even on the video can't see that very well. But there's like some bubbles in the edge of the lung here. This is emphysema, just the beginning of emphysema. And then right here, can you see this little difference in color? It's real firm and rubbery. That's a lung cancer.
Oh, goodness.
It's probably a metastatic lung cancer from some other organ. Okay. And you can see on the edge here a little bit difference in the character of the texture of the lung. That's emphysema, where it's just kind of the little tiny sacs kind of coalesce together. Instead of squeezing the air out, they don't move much air at all. So somebody with emphysema can't get the air out of their lungs. It's trapped in there because the lungs aren't real elastic in pushing the air out. Okay. So that's pretty much everything. So I know we went over, and we have to be out of here at 7. So if anybody has any questions or wants to come up and take a quick look, but we do have to get out of here pretty quick. So thanks for coming tonight. Hopefully it helped you.